Hi everyone, it's Rob here with the Entrepreneurial Odyssey podcast where we share stories about entrepreneurs. And today I'm here with Joe Griffin. Joe, welcome. Appreciate having you here. Would you take just a minute and just tell us a little bit about what you do now?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm the CEO of a financial planning group here in Salt Lake County, and I've been with this group for just a little while, and I've really enjoyed it. We're a comprehensive financial planning group. So we go through all aspects of our clients' financial world, from tax planning, certainly the money management side. We do an insurance evaluation, and we go through all of their estate planning work, just looking for blind spots.
Oh, very cool. So, what led you to decide that this was your passion, that this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, going through college, I really was never settled on what my career path was going to be. So as I was going through school, I was doing summer sales, and the only thing I was certain of is that I didn't want to do that for very long. And so I finished up with that, and during my last year of college, I started working for another financial planning group in Salt Lake County and started there. I took a pretty significant pay cut to start with this group, just feeling, okay, I think there's some opportunity here, and a growing group. And joined at the time, I was one of three employees. And when I left that group, when I resigned from that group in 2022, I think we're at very close to 19 employees and just under $1 billion in assets under management at that time.
Wow, that's fantastic. Tell us a little bit about, let's go back a little bit to maybe before that. Talk about the sales aspect of it, maybe how that played a role in you becoming more of the entrepreneur type. Tell us,
Yeah.
in your mind, what makes an entrepreneur? How did you get to where you are, and what was that journey like?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So the biggest thing in my mind is entrepreneurs they have to be self-starters. You cannot be one of the type that just incessantly needs to be checked in on and managed. At the end of the day, one thing that's relatively conclusive between every entrepreneur is they just have to have an extremely hard work ethic and just be go-getters. No one's looking over your shoulder and checking in on you. If it's to be, it's really up to the entrepreneur to get it done and figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I've heard that from so many people. You look at these entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, who talks about how he works like 100 hours a week or some crazy thing like that. He just gets a couple hours of sleep. Now, me personally, I don't think I can do that. I'm getting too old. But you're right. I think that passion, that drive, that commitment to the business is absolutely huge. I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners that kind of dip their toe into the concept of owning their own business, but then when they find that it's really going to take a lot of work, they're a little bit hesitant, or sometimes it's just a matter of faith. They just don't feel like, is this really going to work? Do I really have what it's going to take? Is there anything in your experience where it just clicked and you just knew you had to make this work and you were going to make this work?
Yeah, I remember the early days when I was first starting in the financial planning world, just coming to this realization of what it was going to take, right? There just wasn't a way that I was going to be able to get to the level that I wanted to personally, or get the business to where it needed to be professionally, without me really putting in quite a bit of time. And so being willing to, on vacations, there was just chapters where we just didn't have the manpower. And it meant that every vacation I was just taking calls and going over emails, because we just weren't at a stage yet in the business where there was enough people and help. So there's some pretty, I would say, brutal times just where I just wasn't able to leave work at work like I am now. And the good thing about an entrepreneur is what's pushing most of us is just this. It really can be summed up into a single word. It's just hope. Hope of what's next, hope of what can be. It's hope. And so all those times, every entrepreneur I've ever spoken to can go back to these stages of being in the trenches when it was dark and brutal, or financially, like this financial turmoil. And so that's, I would say, relatively unanimous in how the journey goes for an entrepreneur. And what gets each of us through it is this one word called hope. And so it did play out like that. And I got to a stage where it scaled and it grew large enough that there was much more help. And it became a joy. And I loved growing the business and building out the business. And of course, you're still working unusual hours, studying for, we were doing a podcast at the time, and I remember there was many nights I'm up till 11 p.m. just studying through things, creating a plan and an agenda and inviting guests, and it just is a lot of work. And so it's never, I would say an entrepreneur is never able to just be a 501er. It's 5 o'clock, so you get to leave. And I don't know that really ever really gets to exist for an entrepreneur. But there are the chapters of turmoil and hard work and just being in the grind. And then there's these chapters that are just bliss, and it starts to turn into a well-run machine, and it's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. I have somewhat of a similar experience where my passion has always been in marketing, and I have a marketing agency, and I was working in marketing for another company, but it came to a point where the business needs just outweighed the needs of me working for this other company, right? So it's like I can work for other people to help them make money, or I can work for myself to help me earn more money, which is going to help my family, which can help my children. There's a lot of that, like you say, that hope behind it of it's not just building for you, but it's building for other people. It's building to provide a better life for you, for your children, and your wife if you're married. And it's just, it's all around about this freedom. But you're right. It's someone put it really good the other day when they said, because I was talking to them about being in my own business and I said, I have a lot more free time. And then I went back, I said, I don't have a lot more free time. And they said, no, you have more flexible time, but you don't have more free time. So it's not like I'm just sitting on a beach laying in a hammock while other people are driving traffic. I think as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you realize how important it really is for you to be in the business working with your clients and your employees and training. And I've heard so many businesses that start out so good, and then for some reason they decide that they can let off the reins a little bit and things start to fall apart a little bit because they let it go a little too much. Talking about that, what are some things that you found that really became obstacles that you had to overcome in order to get to where you are now?
Yeah, there's a few things as I thought about this question, but just in an attempt to create something that might be helpful for your listeners, I really boiled this down to one thing. Very early in my leadership career, I was in this place where as I was considering making adjustments in the business, there was gaps. And so this idea of might need to promote this person to this position. And early in my career, I looked at it and said, this person's here, and why wouldn't they go to this other position? Why wouldn't they accept this other position? And so I found that I wasn't great at really digging into and communicating with that person to find out what they were interested in. I found myself thinking and acting as if they would do what I would do. And I found that to be completely unworkable. And so one thing that I learned really quickly, I would say the hard way, frustrating some of my team members at times, and which led to frustration with myself. And I learned that if adjustments need to be made, it doesn't matter if it's a new hire, it doesn't matter if it's an adjustment from within, a promotion, it doesn't matter. You really have to go to that person and create the time to say, look, this is available, but is this something that you are interested in? And I found that to be wildly helpful over my career in making sure that the right person is in the right seat. Because at the end of the day, if the person feels forced to move to this other role, to this other position, and it's not the decision that they have made, then the level of enrollment with that person is really not there. And that's a mistake I'll never make again in my career, of nudging or being any level of forceful into moving that person into a different place in their career that they're uninterested in going. And oddly enough, I've actually had someone debate this with me that looked at it differently. This person came and their outlook was, hey, listen, this is the business and the needs of the business come first. And if that role needs to be filled, then damn it, then shove them in there. And I get that can be a perspective. It's just not my perspective. And my advice would be, yes, the needs of the business come first, but you really need to have the right person in the right seat. And if they're uninterested and unwilling and unenrolled in being in that seat, then I would submit to you that it's an enormous mistake to try to force them into that role, into that position.
Yeah, I learned a while ago too, when I managed a team at a call center years and years ago. This is like a past life we're talking about. The people are there because the employees are there because they're trying to take care of their employees. They have their own goals. They have their own ambitions. So when I would try to motivate them, I learned like exactly what you're saying is if I can find out what their goals and their ambitions are, and then try to tie those into the company goals and ambitions so that when they reach the company goals, then they're helping to reach their own goals. So that way they're more invested in what they're doing. They're more likely to perform. I even had one person where I just was talking about like, why are you here? Do you enjoy the job? And they were talking about how it was okay, but it wasn't really. And what was interesting is this was somewhat of a kind of a sales job. And so we talked about what is it that you want for you and your family? And as they talked about it, I said, would an extra $1,000 a month help with that? Would an extra $1,500 a month help with that? Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's what you should be focused on. When you're talking to that customer, you're talking to that client, you should be excited and happy because when you think about it, what you're doing is you're providing a service to them that is going to be beneficial to them, but also to you and to your family. And so by bringing those goals together so that their goals became the company goals and vice versa, exactly what you're saying, it makes a big difference getting people who are invested and want to do the job and appreciate the job and have an affinity towards that. And you're right, if they don't and they're not the right fit for that, doesn't mean you have to get rid of them. It just means you find something that they can do and you build a team around that. Based on that, I got a question, and that's how did how has your leadership style evolved over time? How did you take me back, I don't know, 10 years ago and what you were like as a leader then compared to what you're like now? And I would love to hit on a little bit more about some of the leadership that you've learned, leadership styles, the way that you lead. Is it more by example? Is it more by motivating? So talk to me a little bit about that and how that's changed.
Yeah, and just being at several different jobs, one of these adjustments for me professionally was just somewhat recently. And the biggest thing is that really is just top-down leadership. And if there's big gaps at the top, whether it's communication, I've lived through that where there's just some of the leaders, some of the executives are just not great at communicating and not great at delegating or follow up. And so it really is just top down leadership. And so making sure that we as leaders of each of these businesses just understand that if it's not coming from us, if we're not creating it, then there's no way to hold the team or anybody accountable for something that we're not creating or living ourselves. So with Tencap, one of the things that we say often is, how do we keep this in existence? So all too often we have these planning meetings or we have our mission statement or our values. It just falls out of existence and it doesn't stay embedded within the company. And so one of the things that I'm up to professionally and that Tencap's up to is just making sure that if we identify something we say is valuable, it's needed, it's necessary, then we're busy trying to make sure that we find ways that it stays in existence, that the group and the company stays enrolled in it. And if we don't do that as the executive team, then it doesn't stay in existence. And so that's one of the things that I would share with people is just identify what is really important to you, even systems, processes, brand values, mission statement, whatever it is. And even just what is your mission statement with your employee? What do you plan on creating for them? What do you plan on, how do you plan on helping them reach their goals? And like you already talked about, Rob, you mentioned some of those conversations with particular team members that you had. And there's so many companies. I can think of an e-com furniture company in Utah that's a multi-million-dollar business. And I have many friends that work for this group, and they very rarely have an opportunity to talk with leadership about their goals, about their plans for them within the business. And it's just really disappointing to me how many people I know that work for this company that are just feel disempowered, they feel unvalued, and they're just this pawn in the game, but they don't really feel connected to their company. They don't feel connected to their role. They aren't seen, heard, or valued. And one of the first questions I've asked them is, when do you talk to upper management leadership, have these employee evaluations, have a chance to ask questions or to state your own goals and find out create what your glide path is with the group? And the answer is that's not happening. And so the problem is that there's this blind spot. There's this big gap called upper management, top down. It's not working. It's not functional. And so that's one of the things I would suggest people look at is, have you really created and identified what's important, what you want your team or your clients and customers to be enrolled in, and what do you need to do to make sure things stay in existence and aren't dropping off? And if people take a moment to consider that question, you'll often identify several things that you know are important that have just faded away.
Yeah, no, I think that is critical. And the communication is also so critical. If you're not communicating, then there are several things that aren't happening. One, they may not understand exactly what they're supposed to be doing. But of course, like you alluded to there, they also don't know that you care. So by communicating, talking to your employees regularly and letting them know that you do care and that you are interested in what's happening in their lives, both on the business side of things and the personal side of things, can have just huge consequences in a positive way, huge benefits, because if you care about your employees in the same way that you want them to care for your clients, then that also just transfers. The more you care for about your employees, the more that your employees are going to care about your clients. And so it really just transfers one through the other to give just an all around better system and better, what's the word I'm looking for, environment
Yeah.
for both the workspace and for your customer needs and how they feel about the business too. Because when I was talking to someone this morning just about a little chat feature on a website that we're building, and she was just so cool. She didn't seem rushed. She just answered the questions. And I just thought, this is a small company one where she feels valued, where she feels secure. It wasn't just some kind of scripted thing she was trying to get through. So that's the kind of environment that I want to set up in my business. And it sounds like the same kind of thing that you're doing on your side as well. Now, I know we talk a lot about kind of the work-life balance for your employees. What about you? How are you taking care of yourselves personally and your family and not just work all the time?
Yeah, and it's something that I think most people think about regularly, just trying to figure out how to manage that. I guess the point that I'm really connected with is every week I just feel like there's so many things to complete, whether it's professionally at work or just personally, things with my family, just things with taking care of the home. Like I just feel like there's this unrelenting list of things to do. And one of the things I'm really connected to is, if I weren't here, if something happened to me, of that to-do list that I have this week, like
Mm-hmm.
what's on there that's actually really important, like that needs to get done, that only I can do. And if I were to write that type of a list out, it's actually very different than my like to-do list. And one of the reasons I find myself incessantly thinking about that is it's a reminder that yes, I'm responsible for completing literally hundreds of things, and you, Rob, and most people listening to this are probably responsible for completing hundreds of things every week. And the reality of it is there's probably 10 to 20 things that we'll do in a week that really matter. And it's not that the rest of them aren't important. It's just that if you or I weren't here, Rob, somebody else would do them. And there'd be this other list called "It's not getting done," and now we just live with that. But the reality of it is, there's probably 20 things or less a week that like really actually matter, that move the needle for you and your family. And so I'm really connected to that list. And one of the things that thinking about that list helps me is it's a reminder that, yeah, I have hundreds of things to do in a week, and there's a certain number of things that just really matter. And often, if I'm not careful, I'll find that just to-do list is taking over the list called This Really Matters, and I need to make the time for it. So it's really this cliche thing called work-life balance, because I don't know that it's ever balanced. But being connected to that list of what are you doing in a week that really matters, and what is your to-do list, and is there a chance that your to-do list is going to take over your This Really Matters list? And I find that if I just continue to think about that and evaluate that, I'm more careful to make sure that my to-do list doesn't just overrun my high priority, needs to be done, it's important list.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that a lot of entrepreneurs like yourself, like me, we even like the Elon Musk, the Bill Gates, these big, they're always interested in what kind of legacy they're leaving behind too. And for me personally, it is easy to get trapped in the mundane day-to-day tasks like you're talking about, but there's always just in the back of that mind that legacy of what am I leaving behind to my friends, my family. Am I really, yeah, dad was great. He ran his business, but we really didn't get to see him. That's not the legacy that I want to leave behind, but where I built something that could benefit them over time, where I could help take care of them, but also let them know that I love them and I appreciate them is also so important. And I think so many entrepreneurs always have a mindset of what am I going to leave behind? What is this legacy? And so a lot of people will start charities and things like that to try to leave a legacy behind. So I think you're absolutely right. You have the day to day, but you also really need to focus on what are those 2 or 3 things a week that really matter. Make sure those get done as well. So
Yeah, Jimmy Rex last year, he shared a story that I'll probably never forget, and I'll just
mm,
sum it up and probably do a terrible job at summarizing it. But
sorry.
he shared the story of being in a private jet with this entrepreneur that was a multi-millionaire, and the gentleman was speaking to Jimmy and sharing that he really hadn't seen his family and his kids, like he rarely gets
Mm,
to see them. And
yeah.
Jimmy was posing the question of, dude, you're flying in this private jet, you've made it, your company's enormous, you don't have ever worry about money again. Like, why aren't you seeing your family? And the gentleman went on to explain, listen, I've built this, and this is my identity and my life and my world, and I don't have the option. In his mind didn't exist that he could ever step back and step away from this gold mine and this enormous company, this empire that he had built. And that story resonated with me because I could see how people get sucked into that.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I'm like really connected to is just making sure that I don't slowly lose myself along the way. Yes, I want to win. Yes, I'm going to win. And yes, I'm determined to create a business that's wildly successful. And that is going to happen. And I'm going to be careful not to lose myself on the way.
Yeah, that's such good advice. One thing I wanted to ask you is speaking about financial things, what are some of the mistakes that you're seeing people make? What are some of the things that you've done to try to overcome those? And then I'm going to follow that up with a question of what are some of the things that you're doing within your company to inspire innovation and continue to build on the knowledge that you have in order to better serve your customers?
Yeah, I love that question. And Rob, just to be clear, I'll put my kind of legal hat on and just offer a fast disclaimer that I'm the CEO of Tencap and I'm not a licensed advisor. And
Mhm.
so I'm not here to give people financial advice, but being in this space for 12 years, I have some experience and I would love to share just a couple of things for your listeners. One of the things that I've seen just over and over incessantly in my career is this people just keep delaying the saving for retirement, and especially entrepreneurs. And the
Mhm.
reason is because often entrepreneurs, they have these dreams and they know that they are very aware that to reach their dreams means infusing capital. And so entrepreneurs are usually financially brave, and they have to be careful that they're not financially reckless. And how do you
Mhm.
balance that? I have a
Mhm.
friend right now that owns a trailer company, And he, over the last 8 months, he is absolutely killing it. And he's in this fork in the road of, do I infuse more capital, open more locations, grow and expand it? Or do I take what I have and just try to milk this for all it's worth and just
Mm,
save what I can?
mm,
And even having an entrepreneur mindset myself, it still isn't a clear decision. He really
mhm,
has a difficult decision, left or right. And what I want to leave people with is that what can be really dangerous financially is this idea that I can't save anything now and I'll do it later in the future.
mhm.
And that is really dangerous because what I've seen hundreds of times, Rob, is people get to that stage called now I'm mid 50 and I
Mhm.
haven't saved for retirement. And it's an enormous deal and something that I just want to jump up on my desk and shout into this mic because if you don't start saving a little now, it's really unlikely that you're going to have an enormous amount to save later. Really having an intelligent financial plan, people have to be connected to what can you do now? And the
Right.
answer is usually something, and it's almost never nothing. And if people will be connected to the possibility that you can start doing a little now, it needs to
Mhm,
go into some sort of an account type, the one that's prudent for you
mhm.
and that stays there, that gets protected from your ambitions as an entrepreneur. And as you grow and scale your business, you're slowly contributing to that account and you're protecting it. Because most entrepreneurs are going to be tempted to want to use that money to build and grow something. It's just
Mm.
in the blood of an entrepreneur.
Yep.
And if you're really careful about guarding that money called this is for my retirement, then once you get to retirement with your slow and steady contributions, you'll have something there. Rob, last point. Think of when you're watching an NFL game and the receiver makes an amazing catch and they've run the ball 40 yards to the end zone. And every season, there's somebody that drops the ball 1 or 2 yards away from the end zone and starts to celebrate. And
Mhm.
sure enough, the whistles get blown and they set the ball down too early. They celebrated too early and there was nothing to celebrate. They didn't score. And this is very similar with people approaching retirement. All too often, people are considering that this will happen later and they just drop the ball. And so, as you think of your own financial plan for every one of your listeners, please hear me when I say, with hundreds of people that I've spoken to over my career, it is the ones that are dedicated to small and steady contributions that end up in a place of financial success and retirement readiness. And you can't replace that. And because in society we rarely really talk about money, how many times, Rob, how many people have come to you and said, I blew it. I
Mhm.
screwed up saving for retirement and I blew it.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
number of times
Yep.
you probably have that conversation is next to zero. Maybe you've had one or two. Because people rarely talk about what isn't working and how they screwed it up. We talk
Right.
about how we're successful and what we did, and we don't want to
Right.
talk about when we blew it. And because I've lived in this world for 12 years, there's a lot of conversations called it wasn't a priority and I blew it. So, what I want to leave your listeners with, Rob, is this raw emotion that I have called it can go wrong. It doesn't go right every time. And if you want to have a successful retirement, then you have to start saving now.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's so many entrepreneurs out there just think I'm gonna just make it so big and I'll be worth millions and then I won't have to worry about money. But there's so many things that can go wrong in a company, so many new technologies that can come out that can totally, excuse me, change the trajectory of the company. Economies can change, and there's just a lot of things that can interrupt what you think is just going to be, hey, at the end, I'm going to have that touchdown, I'm going to celebrate. But going back to the football analogy, it's not one touchdown that wins the game or a season, it's over and over. So you have to continue to take a little bit of that income that you're creating and invest it in yourself and your family, your retirement. There's always room to take a little bit and put it away. You can still invest in growth and employees and those kind of things. But if you're like, yeah, I agree, if you're not putting some things away now, you always think you're going to get there and you never really do.
And all too
So,
often, it never pans out exactly like we think. And
hmm
because we're so used to procrastinating, and entrepreneurs are sometimes some of the worst procrastinators. And you just can't procrastinate away your retirement savings. It's really, by the time you consider the tax implications from even these
hmm
people that make egregious amounts of money during the last few chapters of their career, it's
hmm
really difficult to save a significant amount by the time you consider what you're paying in federal and state taxes.
yeah.
So put away what you can now and make it a slow, disciplined journey, and stop kidding yourself that it's going to all happen in one chapter at the end of your career. It's foolish.
I'll tell you what, when we run this podcast and I post it up here, there will be a place where I can put some information at the bottom of this. So love to get a link to your website, maybe an informational packet or something that you can put together for people. That would be awesome. We'll have that there. Tell me a little bit about your going back. How do you keep the innovation going within the company to make sure that you're continuing to find the best places for people to put their money and how to invest and how things are changing a little bit in that circle?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. At this stage in my career, there's this thing called robo advisors, and this idea and many articles that might suggest that our industry could be taken over by technology. And the reason that I'm confident that's not going to happen is just the level of personal touch that we
hmm
have to infuse into each client relationship. So for Tencap, we're fiduciaries on every case. So we have a legal obligation to do what's best for our clients. I've never worked for a group that is not a stated fiduciary on each case. So that's something that I think is wildly important. But then from there, what kind of sets us apart and what I think is important as people are shopping for financial advisors, bear in mind that there are lots of really great financial planning groups in Utah. And there's also lots of groups that I wouldn't refer anybody that I care about. So how do you figure out which one to go to, who to work with, where to place your money? And that's really a topic for another podcast. So I'm not going to get into all of that. But
Yeah.
I do want to just submit a few reasons that Tencap is excellent at what we do. So
Okay.
number one is we can't wait to teach and coach about our financial planning and our methodology, our investment methodology. It's highly logical, it makes tons of sense, and it's evidence-based. So as we're going through and teaching that to our clients, that conversation called, hey, you used to be working with this group and you just did it because they told you to, and now we want to actually go through the academics, we want to teach, we want to coach, we want to show you what we're going to do, and more importantly, why, because we know that education will have a huge impact in how the client views financial markets and financial cycles. So that's enormous. But then on top of that, we go through each of our clients' tax returns. In Tencap, we deal with high net worth individuals, business owners, physicians, executives. These people almost unanimously have complicated tax lives. And so to have a team dedicated to going through your tax analysis and reviewing and looking for strategic ways to reduce your tax bill is wildly helpful. And we're not competing with your CPA. Bear in mind that we know that you need someone to complete your tax return and you need someone focused on tax strategy. So we're not competing with your CPA, we're working with your CPA. One, your CPA is focused on tax compliance and Tencap is focused on tax strategy. And I would submit to you, Rob, that you need both. You need a
Right.
tax compliant tax return and you need tax strategy. And so from there, we figure out, do you have an estate plan complete? And if the answer is no, that's something that we want to help you complete as an intelligent estate plan. And we have a whole team dedicated to making sure we can complete that and get that done intelligently and efficiently. And the last thing, Rob, is that we spend quite a bit of time on insurance analysis, going through someone's auto, umbrella, homeowners. There's several different points around each of those policies, and often there are big blind spots in those policies. Do we get paid if we review your auto policy and suggest a change? No, we don't sell auto insurance at Tencap. We're not interested in that. But we are interested in making sure that you have optimal coverage and that there's no blind spots for you. So it's that comprehensive approach, going through everything, that really adds a lot of value to our clients. So the last thing I'll say on that vein, Rob, is that often clients will call us and have one or two things that they're interested in. And those are the reasons that we can complete those needs. And those are often the reasons that they hire us. But the
Mm-hmm.
reason that they don't leave is because we end up going through all things that roll up into their financial world. And that's been very empowering for clients, very helpful. And at the end of the day, we have no concern of being replaced by any sort of automation in financial planning, because there's far too much that we're really devoted to and committed to making sure is prudent in someone's financial plan.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it really comes down to, like you say, some of the things we talked about, the entrepreneurial legacy. We're trying to build this company, we're trying to create better lives for our families. And even things like, I remember talking to or listening to someone talk about how they were really doing pretty well, but he made some joke. He said, I don't have life insurance because when I die, I want it to be a real tragedy or something like that. But as an entrepreneur, right, and our families a lot of times have really bent over backwards to accommodate us, and the fact that we aren't always there and we aren't always around like we could be, because we're not just doing the 9 to 5 and then we come home and we have the night off to hang out. Our families really are being flexible and understanding, working with us. Why not do everything you can to take care of them as well, by putting a good retirement away, getting the insurance things that you need, looking for places that you can save money and build estates and asset protection type things to make sure that it's not just all lost when you pass away. So those are huge things, I think, that I'm glad you brought up on that. Is there anything else as far as that you can think of where you look at our listeners, you look at the business owners, these entrepreneurs, and you just say, if there's one thing that I would have done differently in my entrepreneurial journey, what would that be?
I think that's a great question, but I think I'll just want to leave with the statement that I've been making and not belabor that point, but really trying to connect people with what are you doing right now during this chapter to help save your retirement. And I feel like I've said a lot on that, and that would really be just the place that I want people to look. Are
Okay.
you pushing this? Are you kicking this can down the road? What excuses have you created for yourself to reduce the level of responsibility you have to save right now? Whatever that story is, if you say that out loud, you'll start to see that it doesn't make sense that you're not doing much right now to save for retirement. And it's often almost unanimously created to this vein called, I'm going to do it later, I just can't do it now. I really want people to look at that, look at the logic of that strategy, and realize that there's a high likelihood that fail. It doesn't go well. And I want every one of the entrepreneurs listening to this, and every leader, every business owner, everyone that's listening to this, to be connected to, no one's going to do this for you. And unfortunately, we don't talk about this very much. We don't talk about retirement readiness and how great you are at saving. Even in this industry called financial planning, I can think of several financial planners right now that live paycheck to paycheck that aren't good at this. So this message is for everyone, and it is possible for you to make small contributions and get to a place that you're ready for retirement. And it is possible for you to be reckless with retirement savings and get towards retirement and not have nearly enough. So I just want to just push on that and just invite people, consider, say out loud, write down what is your plan, analyze it, and make sure it's sensible. Don't talk yourself into something that doesn't make any sense at all once you really look at your plan on paper or verbalize it. Does it make sense? Is it workable?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I feel we've talked a lot on this podcast about the importance of making sure that we're doing all the big important things that need to be done, as well as just the day-to-day tasks that need to be done. And so I think it's great, because if you're listening to this podcast right now, just maybe take a minute when we're finished and just think about am I really hitting the points that are going to be important for me, for my family, for the business, or am I just getting caught up in this mundane, everyday task building, meeting with clients, selling, training, and you're missing some of those key elements that are going to help you grow, help you retire, help your family. I think those are very important to just think about. And that's a lot what I've gotten out of this podcast is to really focus on some of those things. So I appreciate your time, Joe. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I will have information at the bottom of this podcast with your links and if phone number. We can put those kinds of things in there so people can get in touch with you if they need to. But I think this is really good information for all these business owners, and I appreciate you spending the time with me. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. The last thing I want to mention, because we are talking a lot about business owners, is for a lot of business owners, they get to this place called I'm ready to sell my business. And it's often an enormous asset. And I want to remind listeners that there's a lot of things that can be done in terms of tax strategy around selling a business.
Okay.
And if you've ever spoken to anybody that sold a business, one of the things about it is you pay a lot in taxes. And if your business is worth much, it's an egregious number that's going to probably bring you close to tears. And so what I want people to be connected with is that there is this world called tax planning around selling a business. And so if you're considering, I would say if you're even close to 5 years from thinking about selling your business, you really need to get in touch with a group that can help you, like Tencap, where we can start analyzing what does your business evaluation look like? What things can we do right now that will make some significant adjustments in your evaluation? And when you get to a place of selling that business, what can be done to reduce the amount that you're paying in taxes? And so if you don't have an answer to that and you're considering selling your business, it's often a blind spot that people need to look at. We're working with a group out of California that does energy, solar plants, and he's looking at selling that business. And we went through some tax strategy saving ideas, and we found a way to save him $6 million off of his tax bill. And none of them are really egregious or hard things. There might be one of them on that list that I would say would be difficult, but not impossible. And he has 6 million reasons that he's going to do it, even though it might be a little bit hard. And so my point is that there's this world called possibility to reduce your tax bill and put more of that hard-earned money into your pocket instead of paying it in taxes. Just a quick reminder, that's a place to look.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, that's really good. And a lot of these things, from what I understand, you can't just do overnight. If you're going to be thinking about selling a building or your business, you need to start some of these or start getting ready for some of these strategies sometimes years in advance. So it's not something, from what I understand, I could be wrong, they can just call you and say, hey, I'm planning on selling my business tomorrow or next week. Can you save me all this money? From what I understand, a lot of these things you need to get set up 3 or 4 or 5 years before you sell. Is that correct?
If you do that, you're likely to find very few things that you can actually change. And given more time, and you can change quite a bit more. And the last thing I'll say on this, Rob, is that goes for every individual as well. So consider that most people are going into their CPA in April and saying, I want to pay less in taxes. How do I do that? And your CPA might give you a couple of things. But if you were to really press your CPA for the right answer, what they're going to tell you is that you missed the boat because you can really only affect significant change to your tax return within the year. And so it's the responsibility of each person to make sure that if there are changes that you want to make to your tax world, that you complete that before the year is over. Because by January 1, all that's possible is for you to assemble and that gets filed and assembled inside of your tax return. But if you want to change your tax outcome, if you want to change your tax picture, those will need to be things, or almost always going to be things that need to be completed before the year is over. So yes, giving the proper amount of time before the transaction or the event occurs will create far more possibilities in what's so with your tax planning.
Okay, so I want to just say thanks again for your time. I really appreciate all that information. I think it's going to be really good for our listeners. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best way is just to call us or go to our website, so tencap.com, and you can schedule a no-cost consultation with one of our advisors. Or if people want to call us and vet some questions and go through more extensively some of the questions that they have, they're welcome to
Hmm.
call us. So tencap.com.
Okay, well, like I say, I'll try to make sure that information's in the bottom of the podcast as well, and then I should be able to maybe even put it in the link on Facebook and other places that we publish this. So that'll be great. Yeah, again, thank you so much for your time. Great advice. I really hope that the people listening to this take into consideration the things that you said because they are so, so important.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Have a good day.
All right, you